I'm so excited to be here with Kirsty Pomeranski. She is the fitness program manager at Life with Cancer. Kirsty came here to Life with Cancer after managing the operations at the Inova Center for Healthy Living. She currently oversees the exercise programming for cancer patients and survivors here at Life with Cancer, and she's a member of and certified by the American Council on Exercise, the National Academy of Sports Medicine, and the Cancer Exercise Training Institute. Kirsty believes in supporting the whole person, including their sexual wellness and finding fulfillment through movement. Kirsty, thank you so much for being here today. I'll pass it off to you to introduce our speaker.
Great. I'd like to welcome Sayde Alexandrescu, who is our yoga therapist and subject matter expert for today. She has been practicing yoga since the age of 12. She holds a master's degree in yoga therapy as well as a master's degree in exercise science. She began teaching in Iowa in January 2001, and she started with general adult classes that spanned into the prenatal, baby, kids, and then led us into our pelvic floor health series. She works with our population at Life with Cancer, teaching our intro to pelvic floor health classes as well as our advanced pelvic floor health classes. And you can check out her classes by visiting lifewithcancer.org. I'm going to turn it over to Sayde.
So yes, Kirsty does take care of the programming. I'm Sayde, by the way. You can pin me if you don't know how to do that. Just kind of hover over me until you see those three dots. And then if you click that, you'll be able to pin me and see me a little better. Yeah, so Kirsty's always have helped me, and I'm really glad she's here tonight. Yeah, so she'll help moderate the conversation. So again, I'm Sayde, and I have been working on building a mastery of pelvic floor health for about 10 years. And then working specifically with oncology patients in the area that I am in addition. So if you need to get a hold of me, you're always welcome to. You can text or call, or drop me an email. And this will be information in this whole slideshow that will be available to you after this course as well. So follow up with me if you have any questions, although definitely I'll make time at the end. So for pelvic floor movement, one of the keys is to realize that when our pelvic floor is not functioning as well as it was, it's maybe we can think of it sort of as that saying, the rug's been pulled out from underneath us, right? So the way to feel like the rug is underneath us is often to bring stuff up to us. So you'll need stuff, right? And today we'll do less movement and a little more slideshows, but if you get to join us in the courses or you get to review this slide, I use these yoga blocks, but at home, maybe I'll just grab a throw pillow and fold it up. This is one of those bolsters. I just put a pillowcase on it. Maybe you have towels, beach towels, blankets. Maybe you have 3 or 4 of them and they're folded up as much as you need. And some of us are just going to use a chair. We're going to use our couch. We're going to use our bed. So whatever you need to, as far as making sure that you have access to stuff that makes you feel more comfortable and calm, which also means setting your environment. So just because I'm talking and, usually I'm giving you some important cues. The other thing to think about is maybe your own background music, or even though you're staring at the screen, what's just beyond the screen. And for me, I have 2 walls of windows. And so when you see me looking up and over you, it's because I'm looking at the eagles or the clouds going by, right? So what things do we really need to make ourselves feel better? So set your own stage. While we're doing our practice today and in the future, you want to make sure to monitor yourself. Drinking water is important to get these movements down to the cellular level and to push toxins through. And then pay attention. I know it seems silly. We'll just be doing some breathing practices and moving our pelvic floor, which is invisible to half of us, right? But letting yourself recognize that permission to pause when you need to and to contact a medical professional if necessary. So how much activity do you need? As survivors, during treatment even, how much activity do you need? Well, the first answer is whatever you can sustain. So at the bottom, it says, are you tight on time? Are you not feeling well? Just start with 5 minutes. Not only are the recommendations for physical activity the same during treatment as they are for the general adult population, they also are more recently discovered that they can be accumulated. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. All right, so if we're looking for moderate intensity of 150 minutes per week, moderate meaning you get your heart rate up. You don't have to be super sweaty, but you get your heart rate going. You get the blood pumping, right? You get those muscles pumping the lymph system, pulling up the extra blood glucose out of the blood, right? 150 minutes is about 30 minutes, 5 times a week. The trouble being that even before diagnosis or treatment, some of us weren't reaching that level. The goal is for a minimum of 150 a week, but that might be 10 minutes 3 times a day. Go do the stairs. I'm not moving very well, right? Even sitting is effortful. Do some leg pumping, right? Something just as silly as points and flex and pump through your legs, right? Turn with your legs up the wall, whatever it is. 10 minutes at a time, maybe 5 minutes at a time, but looking to accumulate 30 minutes. Muscle strengthening also has been shown more and more to be beneficial. So why? Why do we need physical activity for people who have survived cancer? Improve sleep, preventing those high blood levels of insulin that I was mentioning, right? Their blood sugars get to go down when the muscles are pulling it up. The decreased self-reported anxiety. Gosh, that one, they keep studying and making sure, like, was that really true that more than half of the people said that they feel better? Really, it was true. And study after study after study are showing us people feel calmer and better. And there's a lot to be anxious about when you're going through treatment and survivorship, when you're dealing as a caretaker or with a caretaker or a lack of a caretaker, right? So recognizing the ability for these levels of activity to actually change our physiology to the point that we can think better and feel better is imperative to your success. Yeah. Improve blood pressure, the heart health in general, increase quality of life. So QOL, they say, it's a quality of life standard, meaning that in general, I feel better, maybe a little less depressed, maybe a little bit more successful in life, maybe a little bit better, but more importantly, that you feel able to do your own self-care, that your general daily activities feel more possible, okay? Bone strength is another important one. Reducing inflammation. In general, right, inflammation is all the rage, right? How do we get that down? Activity that moves stuff through our whole body, and in doing so it releases other hormones that that set us for a higher immunity. Now, if you're going to the gym regularly and kids are licking the machines or people are coughing all over it and you've just had a treatment, I don't know that your immune system can necessarily tax that. But if you're finding ways to stay physically active and moderate your exposure to stuff, that's what I mean by immunity. And then lastly, improved body composition. Again, some of us find ourselves in this position because our body composition has deteriorated over time due to work situations, stress levels, nutrition, lack of nutrition, as it were, or just our general, lack of activity level. And whether you weigh less on the scale, muscles do weigh more than that adipose, that fat tissue, but it also moves better and functions better, and it keeps you healthier. So what are we looking for? A pelvic floor. A healthy pelvic floor. At its best, a healthy pelvic floor can relax. This is the bigger challenge for some of us. This is actually the biggest challenge for very healthy 18 to 24-year-old athletes, right? Some of us, one of the things that some dysfunction in our pelvic floor is giving us is some leakage. It's bothersome. 18 to 24-year-old athletes have just as high levels of urinary incontinence as 65 to 75-year-old women, because they engage their pelvic floor and they don't know how to relax. And then at some point, maybe that's what your pelvic floor had to do, was hold on and be helpful, to which you say thank you. But also at some point we need for it to learn how to relax again, meaning that it'll contract voluntarily or it'll contract involuntarily, right? When we breathe, when we take a big breath in, that the pelvic floor will hold us. And when we take a big breath out, the pelvic floor will stabilize and help to push that air out. In addition, if we want to pick something up, right? Remember when we were young and we'd pick something up and everything from collarbone to the base of our bottom would engage and hold on? And now we have certain areas that hold more than the others, which maybe push on the others. And maybe it's like a balloon trying to be squeezed. It just has pressure and things just get pushed out of the way. So whether we're being breathed or whether we're incurring load demands, meaning we're carrying or picking things up, we have the ability for the pelvic floor to come underneath us and do that. At its best, a healthy pelvic floor will move in timing with the breath cycle without you having to willingly control it. That being said, we practice some breath stuff so that you can get there. So which of these works better? We're going to find out in just a moment, but here's a hammock. And it's not just a hammock, but this hammock is tethered, yeah? Do you see how it's tethered between two trees? So you have a hammock that's being held, and notice how the two trees, how the hammock has two pieces of rope on the end to wrap around either side of the tree. Okay, is this maybe a right hip bone and a left hip bone, and this is your pelvic floor? It might be getting kind of hoodoo for you guys, but there are other people for whom the terminology means nothing and they need a visualization. So we're going to work with everybody's learning needs. Or maybe you see yourself more as having a spider web, right? Something that's woven and interwoven, but it's a spider web that's in a doorway or on a fence post, right? Because it's got two sides that are going to be holding it. Does that make any sense? So let's take that and try and turn it into a practice. Part of our pelvic floor practice, again, as I said, is not just trying to engage it again, to breathe with it again, but it's learning to relax. So we're going to find ourselves in a comfortable place. It's called constructive rest in yoga. They're starting to use it more in PT and other health forms as well. So whether your constructive rest is seated, and if you're seated, get something under your feet, make sure your toes are covered, put something behind your back so that your lumbar curve is supported, push yourself up against the wall so your head is held by something. Or whether you're on the ground and you have less the books, and I like more kind of a rolled up blanket here, I'll show you in just a moment. And again, maybe you have your feet on the couch, on a chair. I'm going to use a bolster today, okay? So I'm going to stop sharing for the moment, but we're going to all get into a comfortable seat or a comfortable lying position. All right, so letting ourselves find that constructive rest as we either scoot all the way back, and in doing so, because some of us are fatigued or in pain or work at a computer or have been working at a computer, we're going to take our towel or our blanket and we're going to fold it up and put it behind our neck so that when we lay our head back, that two shoulder blades, all three corners of your tailbone and a skull touch comfortably, okay? I'm going to do the same on the ground. And I'm going to have some support underneath my knees. That's a good trauma place too. Maybe I'm going to put something under my wrist because as I descend to the ground, maybe I realize that my shoulders have a hard time lying back. So if your shoulders have a hard time flattening, bring something under your wrists and draw the head of those arms down. Does that make sense? Let your feet be comfortable, maybe covered as we lie back. Maybe you want a pillow underneath your tailbone. How many of us have either discomfort in our tailbone or just we don't have as much meat there as we used to? Yeah? We're at all stages. So letting yourself take time for you. And speaking of having something visual, maybe you just close your eyes. If it's more comfortable, you can open your eyes, but try to find one spot to stare at. With your hands on your belly, just feel your belly rise and fall. Take a deeper breath in. And determine what works best for you. As you think about the floor of your pelvis, as you think about the space between your left hip bone, your right hip bone, your pubic bone, your tailbone, what exists there? It's a pelvic floor, but for you, is it a hammock? Or is it a spider's web? Our pelvic floor aims to support us. It's interconnected tissue. We have ligaments, and muscle, tendon. There's skeletal alignment to consider. Tissue, there are bones, there are organs floating in there. As you take a breath in, can you feel like your organs can float a little more easily? And as you exhale, can you draw all three corners of your tailbone parallel to the ground or to the wall again? Can you release any short muscles, release any tension, release any apprehension, which is always the first time you're doing something, there's always a little of that. Visualize that pelvic floor as either a hammock or spider's web shaped as an interwoven, interconnected function, tethered to the bones, but freely supporting the changing size of your bladder, your bowel and colon, your sexual organs, letting yourself realize that space to just be. And as you inhale, you realize the ability, even if you jump on a hammock, it'll hold you, even if it stretches out slightly to do it. Even if a fly tries to buzz through a spider's web, the spider's web holds it, just ebbing and flowing with the wind. Our pelvic floor holds us. Maybe it's holding you a little less well than it did before based on alignment or age or injury, surgery, side effects of medication. But the pelvic floor also has a psycho-emotional piece. It's also holding our safety response, our traumas, which everybody's had trauma in the last 4 years, and this diagnosis is a trauma in and of itself, yeah? When the pelvic floor is unable to be connected to easily or is always in alert, it can't even relax. You realize that it was that nervous system engaging from a real lack of safety or security at some point. And we create a state of hyper-vigilant negative emotions that are stuck there. Is it fear or worry, sadness or anger, self-doubt? Do we forget to turn off even in calmer times? So take a deeper breath in. Because until we can engage in a relaxation response, we can't return to full pelvic floor health. Okay? So think about that. Until that spider web can shift with breath, can hold the dew, can have the holes for exit, but the holes also for energy to enter, until that hammock is tethered, but also free under the sun and in the air, until you can relax, you're not going to be able to obtain full pelvic floor health. So that's why we do something that doesn't seem like movement at all, but it's triggering that movement. First of all, we're encouraging a little more alignment here. Straighten your neck another 1/8 of an inch. Relax your knees and your jaw a little bit more. Because misalignment inhibits our proper breathing. Without our full breath capacity, it's hard to access that full relaxation response. And we need more than just our lungs or a diaphragm for breath. We need that pelvic floor. Okay. So what's the fix for a lack of pelvic health? More movement with more breath, less sitting, and knowing where our perineum is directed during our movements. So let's start with a full breath. Okay. And this can become quite aerobic. So on your next inhale, let your hands come up by your collarbone. Okay. Some of us our shoulders are kind of cranky, but if you can, get the base of your palm, the meat of your palm under your collarbone. And does that mean that your palms are here, that you've crisscrossed your arms, or maybe your shoulders and wrists won't do that at all and you just have your fingertips? But we inhale, realizing that sometimes when we take a big breath in, our shoulders lift. There's actually not breath capacity in our neck and shoulders. So tuck your shoulder blades under again. Make yourself 10% more comfortable. Breathe into the width of your collarbone, which means your chest opens. And then breathe out of here. It doesn't take that long. This is our shallowest area of breath. Breathe into the width of your collarbone. Sometimes I'll say chest, but I mean this width of the collarbone. And breathe out completely. Breathe in. And as you breathe out, follow that air out completely. Good. Can your head be supported? Is it back against the wall or down on the floor? As we inhale, expanding our collarbone, noticing maybe we have anxiety or comorbidity, asthma, allergies. And can you exhale, knowing that another breath awaits you? Hands come down. We're going to grab onto our ribs. And for some of us, our thumbs don't want to go behind us. If they can, do, and spread your fingers out a lot. Maybe you tuck your thumb in and push more with the meat of your palms again, and then adjust. So your shoulders, your elbows can relax. I want you to let your hands just be tactile, be something that you touch as you breathe into them. And breathe out, hands push towards center. Can we do that again without shifting our hips or tucking our tailbone? Breathe in, tailbone on the ground, back on the wall. Breathe out, hands push. Again, breathe from collarbone to ribs. Does this help to remind you? You can feel the bone of your ribs, but between each two ribs, there's a one muscle. And especially when we're not feeling well, we don't use those muscles again. As we get to be adults, unless you run and breathe properly, unless you swim, it's really difficult to keep these muscles toned. So let's do it together by just having our hands there for something to feel, that tactile presence. And then using our hands to help the contraction push into center. One more big breath from collarbone to ribs. Breathe out of your ribs. Breathe out of your collarbone completely. Hands come down. We're going to find our third area of breath. So you know where your ribs stop connecting? Somewhere in there, have your thumbs point up and let your pointer fingers go down towards your belly button. And when we inhale, our belly don't. And as we exhale, can we ask our navel to move closer to our spine? Again, do you feel your jaw or your knees or your hips or your bottom try to tighten? We just need our abdomen to do this right now. We inhale our belly floating, rising. And as we exhale, draw your navel towards your spine, falling. Inhale, rising. Exhale, falling. Do you feel yourself building a wave? It's the same wave that the light travels to us from the center of our universe at the sun all the way to reach us. The light travels on wavelengths, and we build it as we inhale from collarbone to ribs to belly. And exhale out of your belly, out of your ribs, and out of your collarbone completely. Did you build the wave? Let's try again. Inhale, build that wave, the same wavelength that sound uses to travel to you. A mighty lion's roar can be heard 50 miles away, and it travels on this wave. Exhale out of your navel, out of your ribs, out of your collarbone. And if you were a beginner yoga student, that'd be it. Be like, good job, 3-part breath. You guys aren't, right? We're at the point in our lives where we need to know about our body in order for it to function better again. And so what we're going to do is find, they call it the inguinal crease, you know, where your thighs come up and you have that fold there. If you wear briefs, it's where the brief line is. So you're going to let yourself have your pinky finger there, and now your thumbs fall back in towards your belly button. And this is our pelvis, right? There's a triangle of our tailbone beneath us. And from hip bone to pubic bone, there's another triangle. Can we fill that triangle with breath? And then can we even stretch the base of our base? Can we stretch our pelvic floor? And as you exhale, can you exhale with your pelvic floor first? And it doesn't mean we're doing this massive kegel. It doesn't mean we're squeezing our bottom or squeezing our abs in. Just from the base of your torso up to the crown of your head, just know that there's a connectivity. Build the wave from collarbone to ribs to belly to pelvis. And then empty the wave from your pelvis through your belly, through your ribs, and out of your collarbone completely. What does that mean? Inhale, build the wave. Now think of another wave, right? The tide, the moon pulls on our waters twice a day, and that tide comes in and out. And yet always there's a wave. And at the very top of that wave is not the tallest point, right? The very top of our wave isn't just our belly button. It rolls over just like a real wave does. Build, build, build with a crescendo, and it rolls over. That's where our pelvis is. And that's our inertia. That's our possibility. That's where the real strength comes. And as we exhale, think about a jagged stone under that water. What happens to it each time the wave rolls out? Inhale, waves are inevitable. It comes again. Build that wave. And exhale, even your worst day, even your most negative emotion can be that rough stone under the water being tumbled and rolled and polished. You feel a little differently. And can we continue to engage this relaxation state, even as we rise back up to our seat, even as we engage again with the screen? So maybe you take your knees to your chest first and breathe there. Maybe you need to wave your knees a little bit side to side, opening your feet wider than your hips, even in your chair to do that. Maybe you roll to one side, and eventually we come into our seat again, using our leg to kind of catapult us, pressing down to pull up. And then we try and discover a little bit more about this pelvic floor, right? And some of you have had more or less experience. Some of you have done more or less research yourself, as it were. I'm going to try and give you just a quick run through so you have an idea what I'm talking about. So this is a side cut. The pelvic floor, I was mentioning, right? It's tethered. So when I was mentioning the triangle of your tailbone, look, below your tailbone, there are actually a couple of other funny little free-floating bone pieces. They're called the coccyx. So the coccyx are down in the back, the pubic bones in the front. And there's this hammock that goes across. And then I'm not sure what Mother Nature was thinking, but the hammock goes across and then we puncture it. Then we put holes right through what's supposed to hold this spider web or this hammock that's supposed to hold all of our breath and our organs. Then we pop holes through it for lines of exit. Yeah. So we've got our urethra going to exit through the urine. We've got our anal opening for our bowel to exit. And then for men, I mean, women have their complaints, but why Mother Nature thought that a prostate below a bladder would continue to work for your whole life, I don't know. But it's there. So we have to create space for it to work and function a little better, right? So thinking about these lines of exit, in front of the anal opening is the perineum, and we're going to work on trying to find our perineum and direct it straight away. Okay, so here's another view of it from underneath. So again, here are these hip bones on the side, and what are all these holes in the hip bones? Oh gosh, you don't even want to know that that's where most of your lymph nodes are hiding. That's where we've got nerves and circulatory channels coming down, where blood and nerves are going through. And then see the white part? As I was mentioning, we not only have these big muscles, but we have connective tissues that really aren't supposed to be overstretched. But how many of us feel like they got burned, they got overstretched, we sat for too long, we lost some function of the supporting muscles around. And now the connective tissues don't work as well as they used to. The sphincters, there are other ones there, right, that sometimes give us trouble. So thinking about all of this stuff, and this is a very simplified view, but we've got stuff going crisscrossed front and back and side to side and then up and down. It's going all the way up into the top of our hip bones and all the way up into the top of our hip cavity, yeah? So how do we develop some sort of imbalance in our pelvic floor? Well, some of this could have started before treatment even, yeah? Some of us have been having issues with our back or our hips or whatever before. Could be postural, culture, just the way we sit at computers, the way we sit in our cars. And I would just like to I send out my greatest, I did my grad degree out there at Johns Hopkins and in Laurel, Maryland. And I understand how important that key bridge is. And I don't know that everybody outside of your area does. So whether it's just your commute is messed up or you've got friends or family who were in construction or now are going to work, all my support to you, to your community. I'll just point that out as well. So stress, something like that. We feel like, our bridge, our structures are being pulled out from underneath us, right? So the habits that we have from the way that we exist in our community, and then there are cultural habits and norms. Some cultures, they'll have more healthier pelvic floors because they sit a little bit better, right? They sit maybe on their haunches, or maybe they're in squatting positions more often. We don't do that in the United States. And further, if we get instruction from authorities, a lot of ex-military, right? They're being told to stand straight. Okay, but if I don't have the muscles up and down my back to actually hold myself straight enough, do I just disconnect my upper body from my lower body, right? Ballet dancers and dancers in general, there's another one that they're told to hold their breath in and up as opposed to open that belly with each breath in. I mentioned earlier our emotional stresses, issues that have happened, they get stored in our pelvic floor. Improper breathing patterns, which can start with anxiety, or they can start with bad air, or they could start with asthma or allergies, or they could start with stress or instruction from authorities. Poor bladder habits, teachers are really bad at this one. They'll hold it or construction workers as well, they'll hold it until lunchtime, and then they hold it again until later. And so sometimes that adds to the imbalances in our pelvic floor. And then once you do have some issues with prolapses or leakage, the fear that it's going to pop out more, that you're going to leak more, makes you hold on a little bit too tight, or makes you hold on more with one side than the other. Yeah. Pain. Oh, what kind of motivator is pain, right? And the pain could be a series of things. And then there are surgeries, there are treatments. Radiation is one of the main ones, right? And there are medications that have side effects. So none of this is to place blame. None of this is to be resentful or angry about it. It's just to think, oh, you know what? I have half these. I have one of these that really is making a difference in my life. I've had all of these at some point. But what can you work on, and what's out of your control? What came up when I asked you to just lay down and take a breath? Did some of these emotional or psychological things come up, right? So what can we work on? What can we not? And not is a fine place to be as long as you acknowledge, as opposed to try and push away. Does that make sense? So our lack of pelvic floor health can be caused by or the result of. So again, we're not trying to place blame. We're just trying to recognize these are related and possible. Okay. When we have some spinal problems in the lumbar or the low back, it could be related to a weak pelvic floor. Or you injured your low back and now your pelvic floor is trying to do the work to compensate for it, right? So it could be an either or. Sacroiliac, they call it the SI joints. If you've ever heard that you had sciatica or have SI joint problems or pain, those are shared areas. Hip or knee imbalances also are related to pelvic floor health. Our bladder weakness, that can lead to either the urgency, the frequency. And then there's the incontinence, which could be urinary, but also we can have flatulence, we can be leaking gas or stool, right? An anal incontinence or urinary incontinence. These prolapses, so there's the bladder that can fall forward, backward, down, up. There's the bowel, and it likes to push into the bladder sometimes, especially if constipation is one of your side effects of your medication, right? And for men, in particular, for anybody, it can be abdominal muscles, but for men in particular, it can be for biological men, the way that your testicles come out, right? Again, nature decided, well, these guys can't be too hot. We have to have the testicles fall out of the body so that temperature can be regulated. They can rise and fall throughout the day. Yeah. So the only way to do that is to pop 2 holes in our abdominal wall. So those are what they call the inguinal hernias. And so for men, that's usually the one that would occur first, but it's also possible to have any of those, right? And as we talk about our pelvic floor health, we also have to address any sexual difficulties or trauma. Maybe they're old, maybe they're new, related to treatment. Digestive difficulties could be constipation or diarrhea or IBS. But if you think about it, if we go back to this image, here's your bladder in its desire to exit. Here's your bowel. What if you're having diarrhea, or what if you're having constipation and this area is inflamed? Where's it going to go? Well, maybe it'll just push back against your tailbone, which again would lead to some of that low back or sacroiliac discomfort. Maybe it's going to push up here against your bladder. Then the inflammation's causing concerns for the way that your bladder is functioning as well. So these things are all connected, and you can determine that based on the fact that there's just not a lot of space there. We're going to come back to this in just a sec, okay? But let's start doing a little more movement together. Let's do this. So we talked about those lines of exit, okay? So if you're in your chair, you're going to sit out to the front of your chair, sit out to the front end of your chair. If you're on the couch, in your bed, I do most of this. For years, I definitely did. And now I make it to the living room usually, but I used to do almost all this in my bed. I'd get up, I'd go pee, I'd go back to bed, and I'd use the headboard to sit up against, and I'd use the cushion of the bed because mine ended up being in that tailbone and that sacroiliac area, and it was too painful to be on any solid ground, right? So wherever you are, I'm fine with. But let's move a little together. Once I go to sit down, if I've been at the computer too long, I can't sit up straight. So if I want to think about a natural spine, there's a little curve at the top of my tailbone. There's a little curve in my neck, not a lot. We don't hang it forward and straighten it out. There's a little curve in my neck. And sometimes the only way to get there is with help and support. So again, I'm going to bring the earth up to me so that, oh, look at that lumbar curve, how easy that was. I'm just take this off too. And what about my knees? I can't just hold them up there. Maybe you want to straighten your legs. Maybe you want to have your legs folded, or maybe they're here, but you've got something underneath. Get your knees as high as you need to so you can take a deep breath in to your belly. All right, so perineum, I'm going to keep talking about that. It was in that white part when we were looking from underneath, that slide where we were looking from underneath, it was the white part, that tendon. And I said it where you're not holding gas or bowel and you're not holding urine. It's between those two spots. If you've ever touched it, it's sort of a wrinklier area. There's skin there, but feels wrinkly on the outside again because it tries to expand and contract. We talked about that. A healthy pelvic floor will expand and contract, so the wrinkles are there for it to fold in and to stretch out. So as you sit as tall as is comfortable, exhale, not tightening through your knees or your jaw or your hips, but just drawing your navel towards your spine, drawing your pelvic floor up. And let's build that wave. Inhale from collarbone to ribs to belly. As your belly breathing against your thighs, that's a good support. To the floor of your pelvis, all the way down to the floor. Exhale from your pelvis through your belly, through your ribs, through your collarbone. Another breath in and out completely. And we're going to try to find where that space for our pelvic floor breath is. So some of us are going to end up kind of feeling like we're little teapots, right? But instead of the teapot, try to keep your chin at center. And I want you to move your hip bones side to side. All right, so I talked about those bones before, a right hip, a left hip, a pubic bone, a tailbone. And I want you to think of those as being the rim of a soup bowl, right? So inside your pelvis is your soup. And I want you to try and spill your soup out of the bowl. This is honestly the hardest part for some of us. We'll feel ligaments or muscle stretch that we don't usually use. Can you do this without your chin wagging completely? If not today, we'll keep on working on it, maybe a month. Let's go forward and backward. Do you have as much range of motion in both directions? Not usually. Is this totally uncomfortable because of treatment stuff? Then try it standing. And in doing it standing, you give yourself permission by being back against the wall with your tailbone and your shoulders, but letting your knees be forward so your pelvic floor doesn't touch anything at all. Right? And we go forward and backward. And again, our chin tries to sort of stay in parallel. A lot of us end up getting a little bit like turtles trying to move. But can we move that pelvic floor independent of everything else? Not necessarily. Why is that? Some of the other reasons we mentioned. But the last is just in this society of ours, this is a sitting area, right? That's where we sit when we're observing screens, when we're commuting, when we're working for a lot of us. This is a sitting area as opposed to an independent right hip and left hip and pubic bone and tailbone and all the organs inside and so on. So spilling the soup, that's a good way to warm up for physical activity for your pelvic floor. And again, it might not work on a chair. It might not work on the floor, but can you try it at the wall if that's what works for you? And then thinking about those lines of exit. All right, I'm gonna sit taller. I'm gonna look down. Can you see the yoke of your pants? You know where your pants cross that seam? Can you see the yoke of your pants? When we're grown up, we don't. When we get good at this again, we're all grown up. We don't see the yoke of our pants because it's facing downward, right? Okay, so if I have it facing forward, I'm gonna adjust, oh, it's still facing my heels. Maybe I put my blanket higher. Maybe I bring my knees higher. And I inhale permission for my belly to elongate. And I exhale permission for my belly to hold my spine and my waist up a little more. Can you do it for two breaths? Might lose it after that, but let's try for 2 breaths to have the alignment where the yoke of our pants, the perineum, we're not holding urine, we're not holding bowel, but in between that perineum faces straight downward. This is a great thing to try and practice seated or even standing. Standing's a funny one because you realize where you were a little bit crooked. Well, let's try it again. For those of us who can, we're going to try it again on our back. And if you don't make it to your back, let yourself again slide back against the wall, or you can try this stuff at the wall as well, standing. We're going to come onto the earth one more time. We're going to see if we can get that perineum to face the top of the baseboard opposite us. Okay. And I'm also going to put on the screen, there's nothing really to see with me. Because again, even if you go to a physician or a health expert and say, hey, I'm having trouble with my pelvic floor, there isn't a lot they can see, right? So let's try to feel. Do you need a blanket underneath your tailbone or your head? Do you adjust to make yourself more comfortable as you lie back? Take a deep breath in and exhale. Can your lines of exit be straighter? Can my bowel be longer and my anus be straighter? Can my urethra point down to the exit, to where it exits my body, even straighter, from bladder to the exit of my body, even straighter? And then your perineum in between, can it face the baseboard opposite you? And you take a deep breath in. And as you exhale, imagine that there's a clock there. Yeah, so that's what I have on the screen now. This won't go up, I don't know. There we go. Imagine that there's a clock. And as we inhale, remembering that we are relaxing our pelvic floor. And as we exhale, can our perineum engage but continue to face the center of that clock? It's missing on that clock. How are we going to make hands? Inhale, we're going to use our breath. Soften the pelvic floor. Exhale, we're going to use our perineum to draw the hands on the clock. So what are we going to put? We're going to put some sort of utensil, writing implement, I should say, in your perineum. Inhale, soften the floor of your pelvis, and your perineum becomes what? Paintbrush, colored pencil, pen, a marker, crayon. And as you exhale, your perineum draws the hand on the clock up to 12 o'clock. And then inhale, back to center, and relax. All right, soften your jaw. Push all 3 corners of your tailbone on the ground. Feel free to make ugly faces. This is very hard to do the first time. This is very hard to do for a couple of weeks. And then it makes more sense. But visualizing helps. Inhale, there's a clock on the wall opposite you. It's from the baseboard up. The center of the clock is where your perineum faces. As we inhale, our pelvic floor is soft. Our perineum becomes some sort of writing implement, writing tool. And as we exhale, our perineum is going to draw the hand on the clock to 1 o'clock. Inhale to center. Exhale, draw the hand to 2 o'clock. If I've lost you, you're doing fine. Inhale to center. Exhale to 3 o'clock, and so on. Go all the way around the clock. Different hours will be hard to access. They'll seem impossible, or you don't have as much movement in that direction. This gets easier. Exhale. to draw a hand on the clock, inhale the center. Even those of you who have yourself scrunched up trying to look at me on the screen, there's not much to see, is there? I'm not doing big hip swinging. I'm not doing big motion through my hips. I'm not trying to have my hips draw. I'm trying to have just my perineum draw the hand on the clock. And when I come to center, can I inhale and relax? Once you get to 12 o'clock, can you go back around? Can you go from 12 to 11 to 10? And what's interesting about that, and if the answer is no, then try just to go to kind of the main cardinal hours. Try to go to from 3 to 9, not U-shaped from 3 to 9, but the perineum stays straight parallel to the ground, 3 to 9. And maybe you just go 12 to 6. Maybe you stop because you didn't realize that just moving through the floor of your pelvis is going to be so effortful on the floor of your pelvis. And the surrounding muscles were going to start to get tired or sore or stiff. But we do these as warm-ups. We do these for awareness. The awareness is key. Where am I off a little bit? How am I a little too tight or short or weaker or just disconnected? Or as I start to do this, why am I angry? Why am I sad? Why am I frustrated? Why am I grieving? Right? Eventually, this is quite slow. Your inhale will take 5 to 6 beats. Your exhale will be twice as long. So it'll take 3 minutes or more to get all the way around the clock in one direction and then back. What does it mean to draw the hands on your clock? And then coming out of this, what do we do to become more comfortable? Well, maybe we start to, as I mentioned before, just bringing your knees to your chest. Maybe I start to straighten my legs. Oh, if I can get the back of my knee straight, how does that help my bottom to engage and my toes to start to engage? And I can actually relax a little. Point and flex, same thing on the other leg. And if I do this for 10 minutes with aerobic breath, collarbone, ribs, belly, pelvis, now I'm starting to build my 150 minutes, even on the days where I just feel kind of terrible, fatigued, nauseous. Yeah. Or you can just let yourself rest and just worry about pressing the back of those knees into your supports. You do this in your chair as well. You can scoot back and just try and extend through those legs, or do one at a time, or bring those legs up to hip height. Yeah. Same with the arms. We can start pumping those arms. So even those of us who feel like physical activity is a barrier to returning to pelvic floor health, let's find things that we can do. And eventually coming up onto our hands and knees, kind of a yoga 101 is cat and dog rolls. Cat and dog rolls can be done at the wall. They can be done on a chair, especially if our wrists and our shoulders aren't going to hold us, right? We can be resting on a chair, our whole arm, our face, our chest, or just onto your forearms. You can get lower using that stack of blankets, pillows, bolsters. But the goal is to have your knees underneath your hips and to have your second toes engaged and straight. What does that mean? Well, go look at them if you can. Can my second toes be straight away from my knees? And if I'm doing this at the wall, it's that wall hang, tailbone to head, tailbone to head. Okay? Traditional cat and dog, wrists are under our shoulders. And as we inhale, we lift our tailbone and bow down through our belly and open our heart toward our arms. And you don't have to pull your head out, but look out. Push into your hands and feet. The exhale starts at your tailbone, rolls through your spine. And you end with your head open. Inhale, lift your tailbone, bow down through your belly, open your heart. What does this mean for our pelvic floor? Well, where's your perineum? As you exhale, a lot of us shut it off. We pinch our and then we pull our belly in and we stretch it back. and our feet start to move, what if your second toes stayed straight back? What if your perineum faced down behind your knees and your spine lifted up from it? And as you inhale, our goal will be to get that perineum to point up to the place where the wall meets the sky. Whoa, that's a bigger stretch than I was doing. And I want to stay open at 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock. So open on the width from left to right. Exhale. Tuck your tailbone, but point your perineum down behind your knees. And how many of us feel like we really just kind of point off to one side? Inhale, lift your tailbone. We have one side that's maybe stronger than another, and it takes over. We inhale into that downward arc because we have space in our belly. We exhale into that upward arc, using our belly to help us roll that air out. One more time in each direction. Other activity that I think is terribly effortful would be a plank. But a 1-minute plank is increased mortality, period. You want to get yourself healthier, talk to your joints, your muscles, your strength, and maybe you modify it. Again, maybe you've got that stack of pillows, blankets, towels, and your forearms are there and your knees just go back and you're working on a diagonal line from your knees to your shoulders. And then you exhale and come out of it. Because you can't hold that forever, but you try. Maybe you're going a little further, doing that on a chair, on the wall, at a diagonal. Maybe you're straightening through your legs as you inhale, straight arms, straight legs. And when we get into a more advanced version of this, the bottom of our shoulder blades and the center of our thighs are toward each other. Where's our perineum facing? Right between our knees. Do you have both second toes facing forward? Oh gosh. How does that, when you shift, if you have to, how does that change your weight distribution in your low back, in your belly, the engagement in your pelvic floor? And even in any of these poses, but even this one, can you breathe from collarbone to ribs to belly to pelvis? And out of your pelvis and your belly and your ribs and your collarbone completely. Good. Try again. Build that wave of breath. Eventually, we rest in a comfortable place, whether it's a child's pose, which is hips to heels and belly to thighs and hairline to something. If your hair doesn't touch the ground, grab a blanket, grab a pillow, grab your hands. Or maybe you use your ottoman. I do that at home a lot. I open my knees around the ottoman. You use your stack of pillows and you fold over. Oh, there's something supporting my belly, which takes the pressure off of that pelvic floor. Big breath in. And out completely again. If that's something that's hard to get into right away, that plank pose, we build it up by doing this bird dog, right? Alternating, maybe getting higher. So there are lots of little micro motions. Wall Pilates is another new fad that's actually quite scientifically supported. It's got evidence base behind it. There are lots of motions we can get into to help us feel more comfortable and to get confident in using our body again, especially if a lack of physical activity is part of what contributed to our diseases. So I want to take time for question and answer. I do want to say before I forget, we have been working with this and more with a pelvic floor health series. Mondays, 4 o'clock, no, yeah, 4 to 4:45 Eastern Standard Time is the intro. You guys, it started this week and it runs in monthly sessions. You guys are fine to jump in next Monday, sign up on Life with Cancer events, right? .org. No, lifewithcancer.org/events. Go to the calendar and sign up. 4 to 4:45 is the intro. Once you've been through a whole month, some people will do it for 2 or 3. Mastering this stuff is not an overnight practice. Then the advanced is available as well. So from now through June 17th, we're going to keep doing Mondays. The advanced is just follows the intro. So it's 5 to 5:45. I'll be running those Mondays all the way through June 17th, an April session, a May session, and a June session. And I really hope you guys can join me because then I have to take a couple months off. So yeah, I'm Sayde, and I see there are some questions. Let's let Kirsty help me with it.
Kirsty, you're muted.
Okay,
sorry,
good.
I apologize.
That's
Great.
right. I was
So
just about to turn off my headset, worried it was me.
that's what happens when you get so ingrained in your talk. I love this topic. Thank you so much for sharing. We have one question from somebody who wanted to learn more or have you talk a little bit more about Kegel exercises.
So I just had someone start this last Monday who had been doing pelvic floor PT, right? So pelvic floor physical therapy with a physical therapist who do amazing work. They're utterly amazing in the way that they're able to isolate and help people. And they're really into the Kegel exercises, right? There is a difference between the yogic approach and the physical therapy approach in that. Let's think about that clock, okay? I started having dysfunction. I had 2 kids, and the second was a sweet fat baby. But I also started having really a lack of pelvic floor health when I tore my Achilles tendon. And I would walk with a bit of a hitch in my giddy up, right? And whether we're carrying kids or bags for work or, doing repetitive work, if you're a laborer, doing stuff here or there, we can have that just natural imbalance. One side stronger, higher, tighter, engaged. If you think about the clock, a Kegel doesn't say, hold the clock to center and pull it to your forehead. The point is breathe out to all the hours of the clock first, and then find that perineum at center. Eventually, will we be trying to draw that perineum up and hold it? Yeah, we will. But it's only when you realize that you need to have a little bit more control and engagement with the whole area. Does that make sense? You didn't realize how tight you were. Thank you for saying that. Someone was saying that it felt good because they didn't realize how tight their bones were. Yeah. And bones technically aren't tight, but boy, there's a whole bunch of interwoven stuff in between that grabs on and holds us, doesn't it? So Kegels are taught, and I would never say they should be untaught. They can be until we've accessed the whole circle, which is really kind of a rectangle to go out to our hips, right? The whole area of our pelvic floor, we can accidentally overuse our strong areas and we can misalign even worse, right? We can decrease our pelvic health function even more. If that makes any sense. Do you have a follow-up question for that? Because I get all esoteric, but is there a specific follow-up question?
We'll just give them another second here. Another person you mentioned concentrating on the perineum and thinking about stopping urine or gas. Will this lead to better control of urinary sphincter or a I'm not sure how to spell that or say that, bulgonesium?
Yes. So can you control the sphincters once they have started to have dysfunction? Not 100%, just like you can't stretch a ligament. I'm going to put that in quotes. And we can't control the sphincter. Does not only realizing that you're tight or have short muscles or weak muscles or whatever, not only does realizing that become important, but realizing that it might just be in one quadrant. I'll give you, you do start to regain center and maintain better control. I'll give you a real quick one. My short fat baby was born 9 years ago. So I pretty much just peed my pants after I had her. And I'm in the United States, so they wouldn't even get me into pelvic floor health therapy for 6 months. And I thought, well, at least I started reading about this some years ago for my own students. So I guess I'll just do the work that I can. Fast forward to 8 years later, my sweet fat baby is no longer sweet and fat. She's super slim and muscular. And I put a little bit of weight on. I started doing that master's of exercise science. So I put a little bit of weight on and I thought, well, I got to get out walking and moving and whatever. So I did my pelvic floor health warm up. I did this plus maybe 2 or 3 other things. I did bridge and a couple of other things. I heard my back crack felt my tailbone settle. I stood up, my hip bones were straight. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go for a walk now. So I have to do this stuff before I go for a walk, right? Because I have a hitch in my giddy up a little bit, right? So I got for a walk and I'm walking and walking. And then I thought, I feel great. And I started going faster and faster. And I peed my pants. Not a whole bunch, but I started leaking, right? And there's a part of me that thought, maybe this is okay. I don't know. It was a real moment of like, am I trusting my instincts or am I going mad? So for 10 days straight, I went for a vigorous walk and I dribbled in my pants. 8 years after I've had this sweet fat baby, right? And on the 11th day, I wasn't leaking anymore. Realizing that I had crossed my legs while I was working at a desk, right? I'd pulled myself slightly off center to the point that when I tried to realign and pull myself back to center and then engage all this muscle, right? Not just in a static way, but in a way that's testing me right and left and testing me up and down. When we get to walking, the reason we start this pelvic floor stuff on our back is because then we don't have all that weight on our pelvic floor. But as soon as we sit up or stand up, our pelvic floor is taking more weight, right? Fighting against gravity. And as we get older, that gets harder, doesn't it? So I was smart enough to be in sync enough with myself to realize it was just coming back to center. And as the side that had been too tight started to correct itself back to center, then this side was left just hanging and leaking until it realigned with the other. And then at center, they were working better. And then the muscles below through my thighs and my knees and my ankles and my feet were all working a little better too. So will it fix it 100%? No. And the thing that nobody really wants to hear is for however long you've had dysfunction in your pelvic floor, it's going to take that long or a little longer to fix it. Nobody wants to hear that. But I keep committing to it. 8 years later, there I was going for a walk, dribbling, and realizing that I actually was getting stronger and straighter and more functional. And it's worth it because age does start to affect things. Yeah, and you've made it this far, so let's not just stay alive, but let ourselves stay alive with a little better quality of life.
Wonderful. I don't see any other questions. We'll give people a few minutes to put some more in the chat box or the question and answer box. You've done such a great job explaining all these complex concepts.
Thanks, and it's hard, right? There's the hump of like, my family is so waspy that they can't even say wasp. They say there is a flying, stinging insect, right? So like to take it, and that was 2 generations ago, right? But to take it over the hump of like, I don't even want to talk about this. And what is she showing a picture of? And to, you know what? I can breathe, I can be here, and I feel better. And so there, so we not only get to share the information, and I'm grateful to share it with you guys, we also then get over the hump of discomfort. Like everything about this in the first meet that we have in this workshop in the first weeks of pelvic floor health is a little bit uncomfortable. And so thank you for sitting in your discomfort a little bit with me so that hopefully we can start feeling better in general.
Are pelvis thrusts helpful lying flat on the back or lifting the pelvis?
So pelvic thrusts will get us in one direction. And if that's what you need for strength is to lift up, then taking it off the ground is a great idea. And if you take it off the ground, and again, we don't just use our butt or our hips or our jaw. How many of us start to use our jaw or our knees or our toes start to curl up off the ground? If you're actually holding with the length of your abdomen, the length of your back, and your hips come into center a little bit, and your perineum can start to point up toward your knees, it's really great. When we were doing the 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock though, right? And so to demonstrate up, not on the ground, but to demonstrate up, right? So pelvic thrusts are useful. They're just going this way, if that's what you need. But if this was actually the bigger trouble, right? Getting yourself to have movement moving backward, then go both directions. And don't think of it as a thrust, but think of it as a gliding movement. And in the glide, what's even more interesting is think about where your perineum is. When we have a stronger side, the glide is really kind of an arc, right? We take our perineum and we go to that strong hip and we get to the back. But if you can actually find that center line for your perineum to be going forward and backward, or maybe you're working on going side to side, that's where I would give my focus. But yeah, no, the strength pelvic thrust is useful. Generally, I'm doing the same sort of motion, but in more of a bridge position where we rise up in the bridge and we roll down through the bridge. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. Give people a few more minutes or for opportunities to ask any questions, share any thoughts.
For some people, did I lose you at the end too? Do you realize how this is like a sequential, like, oh, I've got to build up to this? Like as soon as I started doing the plank and then I was like, we could do bird dogs as well. Were you just like, what? No, no, I cannot.
It's a
And that's
practice.
okay. Right. It's a practice. And no is a perfectly fine answer. I like to hear no. No means no often means you're listening to your body and not just trying to mindlessly do things. But so it's sequential. And so that's as I said, we do 4 weeks and then we start again and we do 4 weeks the next month. And you'd be surprised how many people just keep coming back to practice together and also to hear a new cue that they couldn't even concentrate on because it was sort of too esoteric the first time, or their body wasn't quite that strong or ready for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but move. Physical, the main thing is physical activity is important. And I know as soon as your pelvic health is um, jeopardized, sitting practices are hard, standing practices are harder, lying on your back is hard, being on your side, well, maybe you can only do one side. Are we just doing leg extensions? Are we just doing arm pumps? But we're doing them for 10 minutes 3 times a day until we reach that minimum capacity to let our whole body do what it's really good at, and that's healing. That's returning back to that DNA we were born with. It loves to do it. That's my favorite thing about yoga. Whatever our misalignments and dysfunctions are, you start practicing the way that it should be, and your body's like, oh, it's easier. I want to go back to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Does the pelvic floor sort of do the opposite of the diaphragm? One relaxes when the other contracts?
This genius. This genius has already done their study. It does exactly the opposite. We talk about that I have a little slide on it and everything in the pelvic floor health series. And we actually have 4 diaphragms. If you want to get very excited about these things. So if you really want to nerd out with me. So when we say diaphragm, generally, most of us are thinking this one. This breathing diaphragm is what we think of. But the truth is, both of these guys work together to help us breathe. This is a thoracic diaphragm. Okay. Here are our ribs, and then they kind of get lower. But all the way around through our ribs, there's a diaphragm. And when we breathe in, it engages. And when it engages, it flattens out. Why? So that our lungs can fill. We can fill those balloons. But in doing so, what does this all have to do? Well, it's got to move out of the way. So we get a nice big Buddha belly. Yeah, right? We fill up. We think we're being cool, standing tall, but as soon as we take a deep breath, our belly sticks out. Very good. The more elastic it can be, the more it'll recoil. Okay. When we inhale, this breathing diaphragm comes down and engages. And when we exhale, it's not supposed to do anything, but when we get anxious and stressed out or we lose our posture, it has to do a little bit. We're supposed to inhale, this one goes flat, exhale, it just recoils right up on this little thread in the middle of it. Inhale, it flattens out. Exhale, it just relaxes. So who's helping? Who's helping? It's lower than where my hand is, but down at the bottom of the base of your base, right? Down at that pelvic floor, between the bottom of your hip bones, between the bottom of your pubic bone and tailbone. As we draw that breath in, this one in the middle flattens out, and this one at the bottom also starts to stretch out a little. Okay. And it domes a little bit. So when this one flattens, this one domes. When this one is engaged, it says, work. This one relaxes. Remember, I said every time we inhale, this one's relaxed. Well, this one's doing a lot of work. And then as we exhale, and this one's just supposed to passively recoil, we engage this at the perineum just a little, just enough for that hammock to be tethered a little tighter to its trees, for that spider web to be held in the wind, right? And so they work exactly in union with each other. And then there are ones up here as well if you sing or whatever you need to use those for. So yes, that's exactly the point, that breathing becomes an interthoracic, right? So from collarbone to the bottom of your ribs, and an interabdominal. So from the bottom of your ribs to the bottom of your torso, and then a whole torso thing. But it's not this. How many of us breathe like this? There isn't enough breath capacity up here. This is the good stuff down here. So yeah, the breath gets lower, it gets deeper, we get more healing, we're more relaxed. birds sing, sunshine is abundance.
Outlook
We
is
do
much
start to,
brighter.
the outlook is much brighter though. Things do get better.
Okay, do we have any other final questions? Thank you so much, Sayde. This has been so educational, informative. Like we said, it's a new concept for a lot of folks out there, but
Weird,
practice,
isn't it? Right?
yeah,
So I'm going
practice.
to type in here real quick for those who are more visual than audio. So it's 4 to 4:45 is the intro. It's Mondays for both of these, and there's an advanced. You need to have gone through 4 weeks of the intro to get into the advanced, and that's 5 to 5:45, and it's through June 17th. Join me on a Monday. I also teach a yoga nidra Mondays at 1, I guess. If your obstacle is really the relaxation response, the yoga nidra is for that. And we are in that constructive rest position in the back with a couple little movement things, but it's saying, hey, can I get my brain down into my body? And can I get my stress levels down enough that I can start to do the better work of healing?
This is really great information. Thank you so much.
Yes, Sayde, thank you so much. What an incredible presentation. So grateful to have you be a part of this series and help people practice their movement in their pelvic floor. We really can't thank you enough. And Kirsty, thank you so much for being here and moderating the session. The couple of questions that popped in about how to join the class, you can go to the Life with Cancer website at lifewithcancer.org and take a look at our calendar. And register through the events calendar. And yes, these classes, especially these pelvic floor ones we're talking about here, are held virtually. So you would be able to attend virtually. They're not on webinar like this one is, but they are virtual and available to you from a distance.
They're free and virtual, so just drop in wherever you are.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. We're so grateful to have hosted you. We hope you all have a wonderful evening. We will see you here for this series again in 2 weeks on April 16th. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Kirsty and Lauren.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Take care.
Thanks to all of our participants as well.